On this exciting new Kirblog, I'm joined by Mr. Shadyvox, and today we shall talk about Yooka-Laylee, there's no doubt. Hey! There we go. Good.
Fantastic. Did you write that yourself?
I did. Well, not the
I'm
composition. That was somebody far more talented than I was.
well, no, I was
Just
about
the
to say.
words. Welcome everybody. As promised over this past week, taking some suggestions from people and putting the word out there that we'd be doing this. I'm joined as musically introduced. I'm joined by a Pagie. Hello, welcome, Pagie.
Ooh, you.
Pagie-Vox.
Pagie-Vox.
Blake Swift, Shadyvox. Yes,
Hello.
who is best known for the voice of Pagie. Not any of the other things that he does. I mean, forget the music and
It's my acclaim.
Alpha, any of that stuff. And we're both joined by a first-time guest for Kirblog, who I'm very, very honored to have, Mr. Chris Sutherland, director
Hello.
of Yooka-Laylee, and also worked on, my God, like more childhood classic Rareware games than I can imagine, which is amazing. So, Chris, thanks for taking the time in between talking off camera before about the update for Yooka-Laylee, and I'm sure the Switch port and a whole lot of stuff, but we appreciate you coming on. So how you been doing?
Doing very good. Thank you very much for the introduction, the musical introduction. That was absolutely wonderful, I think. I wasn't expecting that at all.
I
I was
wasn't,
just trying to think how to describe it. I think wonderful is a good
Oh,
way
well, I
to describe
appreciate
it.
that. That's how we do
Interesting
things
is
here.
how I describe
Yeah,
it.
that's neutral enough. So I want to get the standard stuff out of the way. I'm sure you've probably talked about this ad nauseum. Just brief history of your time in the game industry for people that don't know how much of an impact you and your colleagues have had on our on our childhoods and the games that we grew up on. A little overview on the stuff that you've done.
Sure, yeah. So I guess I started at Rare in 1989 and then worked on a number of games. I guess the ones people might know of are Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong Country 2, Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, Grabbed by the Ghoulies, and then kind of that was as a software engineer, and then also later did some things as a producer, such as Viva Pinata and some of the Connect Sports games, and also did the voice for Daniel Carrington in Perfect Dark, and then also went on to form Playtonic Games, and then we brought out the Kickstarter a couple of years ago, which went quite well, and then we launched the game in April.
On the note of,
I was trying to ad hoc my history, but that's as much as I can remember anyway.
Well, on the note of the voice stuff, just because I'm a huge trivia nerd for voiceover in games and cartoons and stuff. You're not just the Perfect Dark character. You're the announcer for Killer Instinct.
That's right. Yes, I am. Sorry, I forgot that. I didn't. Quite a few things to remember there, so I tend to forget some of them.
Actually,
yes, I'm also the announcer.
I got to clear up a rumor because I think I might have had some misinformation on a video I did a long time ago. Are you also, or were you? I mean, I know not now because I think it's a Japanese fellow who does them. But were you Diddy Kong for a long time?
I'm not sure that I was. The funny thing is, what would happen, the way that it would work, and the reason that some of us don't even know what voices we did is because you'd just be sitting there, and then someone would give you a call and say, "Oh, do you want to try a voice for this character?" And you go, "Yeah, I'll just go up now." So you just go up to the recording studio, make some noises, and you get back to your desk again. And so that was sometimes literally what it was. Even some of the spoken words were simply a case of, read this line. Okay, I'll read that line. I've gone now. There wasn't any kind of what's my motivation or what's this character really feeling. Where is he coming from? It was just read that line and okay, I guess that's the context is this line. Or make this noise and then that was it. So that's why I'm not entirely sure whether it may be that I did at one point make a noise. And the other thing is sometimes we'd make those noises and then the audio department might decide actually this one's no good, we'll pick somebody else. And so we didn't sometimes not even necessarily know which voices actually made it in.
Right.
So there could be several people competing for that title. All of them may have actually recorded Diddy Kong, and maybe only one of them was the true one.
I was about to ask, was there ever like a competitive sort of situation within the team, or was it always a case of you just get called in, you do your 5 minutes, and you get back to your desk and you just leave it? Or was there always like, oh, I hope I get called in for this sort of deal?
I think it was very ad hoc, and so it was kind of more. I guess in the case of something like Banjo, it was probably Grant deciding whether there might be a noise he didn't like to make himself, or he didn't think he could make himself, or he might be thought someone else can make that one better, and he just picked someone. And so it wasn't so competitive in that sense. I guess what we did with Yooka is we tried to make sure that everybody had their own their voice in the game as one of the characters. So people had an option there, and then obviously we've opened that up to backers as well.
Mm-hmm. Which, of course, JD of getting to be
yes,
the
exactly.
core collectible makes me so happy. And actually, of course, I didn't even mention both Banjo and Kazooie, and now Yooka-Laylee, you're the voice of, which is fantastic.
That's right.
I geek out so much on that just because, like, as a kid, and I even had some old animations I did on in my early, like, mid to 2000s days or whatever. I would like try to. What would these characters sound like if they spoke full sentences or whatever? Like, and then Banjo ended up sounding like Goofy or whatever, that kind of things. But I don't know, that stuff is intriguing to me. Even I know for you guys it was just probably just like, all right, we just got to get a clip in there, whatever. But then like 20 years later, I'm just like, ooh, who was that? I'm curious or whatever.
I think so. Well, I mean, Banjo did actually speak in Diddy Kong Racing, because I think he
did. He said his name.
Yeah.
He said his name. He said, it was something like, I'm Banjo, or something like that.
Yes.
It's the best. All right, enough about voiceover. I'll probably nerd about that later. All right, so. I have a bunch of different questions, some from some folks on Twitter and Facebook. Also, actually, this is good timing that we pushed this back until doing this until now, because by this point, Shady and I are actually, and now we can talk about this publicly, we're working on a game of our own that we're hoping to do a Kickstarter for over the summer. So we'll probably be picking your brain about that a little bit too. But we had a couple questions also submitted from some of our dev team who were like, whoa, what? This guy, oh my God, I want to get advice for this dude. So first thing, this is kind of going back to the early days. And even actually, maybe even now too, because I'm curious, is kind of a lot of these, you guys worked on so many different genres of game, like, Rareware wasn't known for, I mean, like, even if you could argue, like, oh, like the 3D platformers, like they did like practically every kind of genre you could imagine at some point. When you guys were doing a lot of these games back in the day, what other games from like other studios were you guys playing that were like really inspiring, that like led to like, oh, what if we did a game like this, and this company did this really good game, what if we tried our hat at this?
So I suppose there's obvious ones like Super Mario 64, thinking back to N64 era, but there was probably a variety of ones, really. I remember probably not long after I joined Rare, they used to have a whole library of NES carts, all these NES games, some of them from Japan, and they were just, I don't read Japanese, so I didn't know what was going on, but I'd just come in at the weekends and I'd just sit through and play all these games one after the other and see, can I get anywhere in this game? Yes, I can complete it, or some of them required lots of text, so it was like I had no idea what I was doing. So I guess there was loads of them I just worked through there. I couldn't tell you what half of them were called, but so there's those ones, and then I guess around that era, I suppose around N64 times, there was a few of us that were within the Banjo team. We used to play GoldenEye, actually, only after it came out. And it was probably, maybe not even immediately after it came out. It was probably a little bit, we used to play multiplayer there. There was a bunch of us that used to, about 4 or 5 of us who used to get round there at lunchtime and spend our lunch hour playing that. And that carried on for about a couple of years, I think. And it just, at the end, we stopped for some reason, but probably because I was always losing, maybe that, and somebody else was
you wanted to keep your title, you wanted to retire.
That's right, retire, and not unbeaten, but the reverse of that.
Well, no, it really says something that like you wouldn't get sick of playing a game that you guys made, because I would imagine after like, you know, however much, I don't know how long the dev period was for GoldenEye, but like you'd think after that it'd be like, all right, let's just play anything but this thing we've been staring at for ages. It's like, oh wow, it still really holds up and it's fun every time. Like that's kind of impressive, I would say.
So that's an interesting point, because the structure of Rare at the time, there was separated into effectively individual, what they were called barns, or different little buildings, and each building had a different game that was developed in it. And so we weren't actually developing GoldenEye. That was a different group, and so we didn't really see much of that until pretty much it was near for release. So a lot of us didn't actually, and that's kind of the way it was back then. It was very much isolated development, and so each team was kind of almost, there was a kind of rivalry in that sense, and each team would build their own thing. So when we saw GoldenEye, obviously that came out, and then we started to play the 4-player. So I think we hadn't gone through that. Maybe if we'd gone through that, like you say, maybe we'd been less inclined to spend another 2 years or so playing it every day. But yeah, no, I think the thing is, these things are always great because they're multiplayer, because you've got the people in the room there. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what gives it the life that allows you to continue and play again and again and again.
Yes.
On the note of the, I actually completely forgot about that, but I remember Chris Seaver was talking a lot about that in his Conquer commentary with a bunch of that team, about the sort of rivalry between the different subgroups of Rare. Did you kind of, I mean, because you did like different things on so many of these, did you kind of bounce around to different groups within the company, or like, or did you kind of stick with like the one that did, like, because I don't know exactly like who was on what team necessarily, but did you kind of have your hands in a lot of pies, I guess?
I think I actually seen somebody created a graph once that showed, I'm sure, that showed the kind of lineage of each team or group, or at least how the structure of how the different releases went. But I was in the one that, so we did, yeah, like I said, Donkey Kong Country, and then we moved on to Banjo. So whilst those games were happening and the sequels, there was other teams working on things like Star Fox Adventures and GoldenEye and all the other games that I can't remember that were made there. Yeah, so I kind of stayed with a particular group for quite a while, actually. It was kind of weird because it was almost like there were certain people who would, when you moved to a new office or a new kind of arrangement or a new building, if you swap buildings around, because sometimes you had to swap because a team was growing and it needed more space, and there was another team which was just starting out in something, so they were a bit smaller, so they had to swap around with that other team. And there was certain kind of almost unwritten rules, such as this person and that person has to sit together, because otherwise they'd get upset and cry. So they wouldn't be able to function if they didn't, or so it was kind of unusual in that respect, I suppose.
So actually, because I didn't even think of that before. So is the Playtonic crew, is that most of the folks that you specifically worked with back in the day, or did it have like a few folks from some of the other sections of Rare too?
Oh, actually, you got a mix. Actually, you got people that like Dave Rose, who worked on Conquer, and then you've got folks who worked on other games. So there's a bunch of other games actually. In fact, they've probably got people that worked on quite a few of the different games from the N64 era, as well as the later games like Cameo and so on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've got a kind of a whole slew of different people which is great, I think, because some of those people it was funny because sometimes you'd work with somebody and maybe they came onto your team to help for a bit, and then they'd go off to their own team, and you'd never see them, because unless you bumped into them at lunchtime, you'd never see them again, maybe for 2 years. You would, and then you're walking down the corridor and you go, "Oh, it's you again." Yes.
How's the kids? Got another one.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Like the different country.
So this is coming out on the Saturday just after E3, I think we'll be over by this point. But we kind of in the wake of talking about 3D platformers, Mario Odyssey is a big talk at the moment, and it's interesting because something I just realized in watching a lot of the coverage of that is a particular cue I noticed that they took is that no longer having to get in this case not stars but moons. You can just get a bunch of them in one sitting. You don't have to do the individual missions, much like another certain number of 3D platformers that you guys did, which I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it was making me think about, I mean, obviously, like, at the time, I know you guys had a pretty close relationship with Nintendo, and I wonder about, like, you know, you said Mario 64 was a big influence, and like the behind-the-scenes thing, how, like, that was, like, the game that changed the scope of, like, what Banjo was going to end up being. You know, what was your guys' relationship with your Japanese counterparts, like, and how, and especially now that you're having Yooka get ported over to Switch too, like, how does that kind of evolve to what it is today?
I guess back then that it was very kind of hands off. I mean, even when we were doing Donkey Kong Country, we would have visits from people like Miyamoto. I mean, that was I guess the structure of the company was then that Tim and Chris would run it, so they would have the meeting with him, and I think there was actually an opportunity to meet him, and I missed it, and then so I signed a T-shirt I've got it somewhere. It's got his name on it.
That's great. That's so cool.
Wow.
But I've missed the opportunity to actually say hello to him. Anyway, so but the kind of things he would suggest would be, I think it was actually Miyamoto that suggested there's a hand slap move in DKC where you can reveal parts. You slap the ground, and then there might be secret things that are hidden in certain places. So, so he was that came from Miyamoto actually. But that was something I think he suggested fairly late on. So I think for the large part, it was a case of just they said off you go. I think they've obviously seen an initial demo that we'd done of the graphics system, the ACM graphics system, and they'd said, "Oh, this looks really good," but they basically said off you go, and then let us do our thing. So I think that was kind of quite good. It was just do that, and then I think they got regular updates, maybe verbally from Tim and Chris, but then I think there was fairly infrequent updates when they actually came over and had a look.
It's nice too. I mean, like when you have a client that like, well, I guess not a client in this case, but like people above you that like trust you to just do your job and like be creative. Mm-hmm. I mean, you guys did so much like great stuff for them back then. I would imagine after a while it's just like, no, we know what you guys do. Just make the good stuff. We trust you.
But it's interesting you're saying about some of the games now, like Mario Odyssey. I had the same thought myself when I was watching one of the trailers or one of the gameplay demos, and they said, "Oh, you don't have to come out of the world." And I thought, I didn't actually, in my head, I wasn't expecting to have to come out of the world because I'd forgotten that you had to come out of the world. When that happened in the past, in previous titles. So I thought, oh right, yes, you do, don't you? But whether they got that from Banjo or whether it was any other game or I don't know. I imagine a lot of these things kind of cycle round, so they make their way into certain games, and then people they become a standard, and they kind of become the new standard way of working or the way of making things.
I mean, well, it's funny too, because even like this is on a little bit of a smaller scale, but I can't help but plug because I love these guys, the Hat in Time folks. Like guys like that who are I want to make a game like this, because I mean, before Yooka, where it's like nobody's making games like this. Screw it, let's make our own or whatever. It's like, is it surreal to like, I mean, not just you, but all you guys, that like you've inspired like a whole generation of like not just gamers but like game developers who like want to make stuff like what they grew up with from you guys, 2015, 10 years ago or whatever.
It is kind of unusual because I've had people when I've been, I think it was one of the last shows we were demoing Yooka-Laylee out, and somebody came up to me and said that I'd inspired them to get into video games in the industry themselves. And I thought, well, it wasn't something I set out to do, and I couldn't even think that I've never actually at any point thought that was going to be the case, that I would inspire anybody or make anybody think that. So it was kind of unusual in a way that I just thought, well, I'm just doing a thing that I enjoy doing, and that was kind of the end of it. The fact that other people pick up on that and kind of want to, take things forward themselves and get into the industry, then that's great. I think,
it's kind of the I mean, the internet is filled with many dark sides, but on one of the few positive sides, the advent of social media, I mean, has made it so like, I see all the time, even actually, before you guys kind of came out of the shadows with Playtonic, Grant has always been so active on, and interactive with his fan base. And like all the time, you know, myself included, would be like, God, like all the stuff that you guys would do, like still stays with me. I'll still go back and play Banjo like once a year and like try to like beat it in like 4 or 5 hours. Or Shady can. What's your fastest time on Banjo, Shady? Remind me again.
Oh God, no, I can't say it because people will get upset at me. I'm confident that I could do it in under 3 hours.
Wow.
Like 100%.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but the speed run world if I can talk, the speed run world record is something like just shy of 2 hours.
Jesus.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't even know what it was. I have no idea what it could have been like, you know, back then in terms of like getting feedback. Like if you go to like an E3 or something, and like, you know, if people would even think to come up and say, hey, I love this game, thanks for doing such a good job, or anything. But now when you have like an entire internet of people who like thousands of folks who are like, thank you for making these games and thank you for bringing about this genre and making this Yooka-Laylee and all this stuff, it's like it must be like super empowering for you guys, like day in and day. Although I imagine also maybe a fair amount of pressure where it's just like all these people that are expecting something.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it works both ways. But yeah, like you say, back then there wasn't really an internet to speak of, and when we were making the games, and there certainly wasn't a way to communicate things. You'd effectively release the game, and then you might see some previews in magazines that had been arranged some time in advance, but those are usually a few tiny screenshots and a lot of words, and you'd only see reaction like I guess after the game came out, or it would be scheduled around the same time to have reviews, but then there might be some letters in one of the magazines. That was about it, or you might occasionally get a letter actually sent in, but that was about it. There was nothing else. So whereas now it's completely the other way around, isn't it? You can't really say anything without people kind of going, right, I've spotted that you've tweeted this, therefore, and I noticed you used the third word was this word, and that must mean that you're planning to do
and you're confirming this game now and here.
And you go, I've now analyzed all your tweets, and the last 5 times you used that word, it meant this. That's the kind of the world we're in now. So,
I mean, look, you should know by this point that much of your fan base is comprised of conspiracy theorists about question mark eggs and ice keys. So, nonetheless.
Actually, taking a little turn on this, could I ask, because we're in the age of like instant gratification where you can get feedback almost immediately when you put something out, it wasn't like that 20 years ago. As you said, it just gets shipped and then whatever the reaction is, it is. Do you find that now with the development that sometimes you can be not necessarily pressured, but more appealed to try a certain direction based on reviews you get mid-development? Or is it always just like you've got a set project idea and you stick to it? Or is there any wiggle room?
Actually, that's a good point. I guess, yeah, we can see that when we put out updates, or when we put out updates of Yooka, that we could go, oh, people seem to like this one, or they didn't like that area or this area. And sometimes it's because, we'd release something, but it wouldn't be entirely final. And we'd think, that's probably okay to just put that video out, but then somebody might say, oh, there's a texture missing here, or they didn't like the way that something didn't fade on or fade out, and we think, oh, right, fix that in our build. But you then think, oh, maybe next time we should put something, make sure that bit's fixed. But then there'll always be something else. That's the problem, is there'll always be something else that people will pick up on. But it does make you think. I'm certainly doing something like the toy box was great, because it gave us some feedback in terms of the controls, and people could say what things they liked and didn't like. And then it was also a point, I think, where first time people encountered the kind of revised swimming controls, which is kind of an interesting point, because we'd were discussing that internally before releasing. So that was interesting to see people's reaction there, because obviously if everybody had gone, actually I hate those controls, I want the other controls, then I don't know, maybe we would have changed things, but we didn't.
Yes.
I mean, there's always patch options.
Yeah.
Swimming is hard.
Yeah, swimming. I feel like no 3D game has ever like fully like mastered like super intuitive swimming controls before. Like which is weird, because like flying seems like it is potentially easier, and swimming is just so difficult to like get exactly right. But that said, I actually did like Yuka's swimming controls more than the Banjo and DK 64 one had. On the note of Yuka, so we were talking a little bit about this with also before we started recording regarding Mr. Kirkhope. I had the pleasure of interviewing him on a podcast that won't be named many years ago, and this was I'm assuming this was you guys. I think it was the Minji Jonjo Twitter. Was that you guys in like the really early stages of like kind of forming the Playtonic team, or was that like a lot of nonsense?
So that was actually an account. I think it was started. I don't know if he wants the name revealed. It was actually started by somebody who was it wasn't that part of Playtonic, but it was actually part of the original Banjo team, and he started the account, and then we were talking to him about it, and so we basically took the account over from him after explaining what we were doing, and because he was effectively trying to get everybody together along with Grant to make something that was basically a new version of the games that we used to make in the past. So that originated from him. We then took that over, and then we kind of switched it around and rebranded it just as we did our announce, actually. So it wasn't something there wasn't a grand scheme of like that went back 10 years of us going, we're going to create this Minji Jongo account, and then we're going to, on this date, we're going to switch it over. I mean, like a lot of the things we do, it probably looks like we planned it out, but in actual fact, it's probably more a set of coincidences, or you take the opportunity when it arises and you go, hey, that would be a cool thing to do. Let's do that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I mean, he was very, very hush-hush about, like, I don't remember what year this was or, like, what stage things were at. I think he mentioned offhandedly, like, oh, we've got, like, a character running in Unity, like, on, like, a tablet or something. It's still very early on. But I do remember also, and I attest to this, even Grant sounded a little bit like he had some doubts of, like, yeah, I mean, like, we might do a Kickstarter, like, I don't know, like, we'll see what happens. And I remember saying right then and there, this is several years ago, I was like, I swear to God, if you guys do a crowdfunding campaign, you will get that money, like, day one. And, I don't think day one necessarily, but I mean, it's certainly safe to say you guys, it paid off very, very much with the Kickstarter and everything, which was great. But yeah, no, it was just so funny. I'd listened to that interview again, like I think about a year ago, and when Yuka was like well underway, and it was just like, God, it's so crazy. Like now this is actually happening. It's real, and my God. But I had a question submitted from one of our dev team members, Fuli, asking about speaking of also the bit about Unity. What were some of the challenges with porting this game to virtually every major platform? And did working with Unity on this make the transition smooth?
Yeah, it does. I think that the main thing is whether it's Unity you're using or any other engine, the fact that you can build something and it generally works on other systems at a kind of base or at a reasonable level, and then you've got to do maybe specific optimization for different systems, but. And the fact that it generally works is a great, an amazing thing now, particularly if I look back at the way we used to build things back in the day, and like N64 era and before, where like I was talking about each team being in a separate building or barn, as we called them, and then each team would also build their own engine. Now that wasn't as crazy a thing as it seemed because the games were smaller, and so the engines, in quotes, were kind of smaller and faster to write, but it's as you got through N64 era and beyond, it was definitely getting to a stage where it was not becoming feasible for each team to build its own engine, and there had to be a kind of point or kind of a coming together of engines, as it were, and so that was an interesting process over those years because you have, like you say, separate teams who each kind of got their own way of doing things, and then it was a case of trying to, I guess, unify those in some way. Without going into too much technical detail.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, because this is, unless I'm mistaken, I think this is the first game that you've worked on that has been on like all major platforms.
Yes, actually, that is correct. Yes, I was just trying to think about that. Yeah, that's correct. Yes, because in starting at Rare, then we were always on Nintendo originally, and then obviously then after around Greg by the Ghoulies. That was then after that all was on Microsoft consoles.
So
actually,
having a Rare game on a PlayStation is actually a Rare style Playtonic game is a first for PlayStation players then, which is kind of cool. So.
No, it was interesting for us because it's something that, although some of our team had done multi-platform development, it wasn't something I've been involved with. So it's just there's so many different variants of those things in terms of you've got you've got Steam, you've got GOG versions, and you've got there's a Windows 64 version, you've got the Windows 32 version of both of those, and then you've got Linux versions, and you've got Mac versions, and then you've got Xbox, and so on and so forth. And so there's just a lot of different versions really that you have to build.
Shady, you had one. I know you wanted to bring up.
Yes, I did. Okay, so my question is, when you come down to the phase of essentially polishing what you've already got set out, or still in the phase of building, when do you make the decision that you've done enough and you can move on to the next item? Or do you have like a particular sort of mantra where you go, this is good enough and I can establish it's good enough because it does this, or do you go, maybe I can do a bit more? Like, where is the hold up on that?
I guess it kind of depends on the feature, but in some cases, like if it was something like one of Yuka's or Yooka-Laylee's moves, then the way that would work is it would be myself working with, say, Steve Males, and he would start off putting in something basic in terms of the moves to get it looking roughly right and feeling roughly right. And then he'd kind of iterate that and make something a bit more advanced, and then we kind of tweak it and then I might go, oh, it looks okay to me, and then Steve might say, actually, no, it doesn't look quite right here, we need to do this, or maybe vice versa. And then we'd also work with design as well. So like Gavin, for example, who would say it needs to feel more like this. So there's often like a kind of a triad of kind of programmer.
Right.
Well, actually, there's a quad, I suppose, because you've got an audio person as well. So you'd have Dan or the person doing sound effects, perhaps they'd be involved as well. So you've got a few people working on one feature, and from each perspective, they will have, from an art perspective, they'll say it's not quite right because of this, or from a gameplay point of view, it's not quite right because of this, and then I'll have some input as well. So we kind of do it like that, and you kind of go around until everybody's happy. Is usually the way it works, and then you move on. So there's a kind of shared understanding of that's what's fine to move on. And I guess it also depends on what stage of the project you're on, because if you're in the beginning stage of the project, you might be focusing on something like the core elements and say core gameplay, and then you might want that to be fun. So you might do things that you wouldn't necessarily be doing if you're about to ship a game tomorrow and you had 8 hours and you had one bug to fix, or you could go, well, I'll make this character dance a little, or I could fix this important bug. Obviously, you're going to fix the important bug. So if you're at the start of a project, you might have a different kind of bar in terms of where you could say that's enough, as to when you're at the end and when you're bug fixing, I guess. If that kind of may give an answer to.
Yeah.
Right. No. Yeah, I get you.
I've got kind of a follow-up to that one too. This is from one of our game designer folks, Scott asked about so once a game is in like a beta stage, I don't know how difficult it may be to go back and change like the overall structure, but do you guys have like strategies like to make sure the flow of the game is like the best it can be in its final days of development? And like how does I don't know like how many testers or anything you guys have? Obviously there was the toy box, which was probably a big help. Mm-hmm. But for like how much does that affect your guys' decisions on like what to change?
Yeah, I mean, what it'll be for us is we'll have designers we've got several designers, so they'll kind of work together and they will kind of review each other's design, and then they'll be able to say, they'll play through each other's worlds or puzzles, and they'll be able to come back and say, this one works well, this one doesn't work so well. And from then they kind of iterate on that and then kind of change things as we go along. So we're trying to do that kind of as much as possible as we go along. I mean, something like Tribal Stack Tropics was probably working in, I'm trying to think what year, let's see, hang on. So we had that was essentially working. That was the end of the Kickstarter year. So that would have been 2015. So probably around, we were demoing that internally in November or December, I think, of 2015. So it was changed many times since then, in little ways that you might, some which you might not notice and some which you would notice. As soon as that's the way I think it works best, is you can get something up and running as soon as possible, and then you kind of just keep tweaking it and changing it, and then and it kind of goes back to that thing we talked about in terms of prioritizing what you want to do. You go, actually, is it more important to change this one feature of something that's already there, or build this new thing? And sometimes it's better to change the thing that's already there and not build the new thing, because it's just a decision you have to make at the time.
Yeah. I guess into some specific questions about Yooka-Laylee as well. We had a lot of fun ones submitted by fans. You had mentioned how some characters in Yooka-Laylee could potentially become stars of their own games. Are there any early candidates at the moment? And I'll add on, if so, any particular genres that you guys are maybe thinking about doing?
I guess, yeah. I mean, there's probably some that you'd be disappointed if you didn't see in other games. I'm trying to answer the question without giving any specifics.
I mean, I'll go ahead and be specific. I'm open
tell me what characters you'd like to see.
I would love to see Diddy Kartos racing at some point. I would love a kart racing. Look, I'm probably, I don't know how if people like.
I'm gonna make
Kartos.
a vote for Pagie's independent game.
Puzzle game. Puzzle game.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't know how beloved or hated Kartos is or whatever, but I quite like him, and I would love to see a Diddy Kong Racing style adventure racing game with him as the forefront, off the rails, Kartos off the rails. That's what I want.
Kartos off the rails.
Fantastic. I still want the Pagie game.
I mean, just slip more 20s into the table. It might happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see. Actually, joking about the conspiracy theory fan base earlier too. Obviously, the advent of I think by this point the mystery of stop and swap has been more or less talked to death. So I won't go too much into that. But the mystery solving kind of stuff was kind of a big part of for guys like us and kind of like the deeper hardcore fans of Banjo and a lot of your guys' games. Is that something? I guess. Would you guys consider doing something akin to, or have you perhaps already set the seeds of it and maybe nobody's found out yet?
So Stop and Swap is kind of interesting. It again touches on something we talked about earlier, which is that back when we created Stop and Swap, there wasn't anybody to really discuss, there was no social media or anything where people could discuss what it was or debate about it or kind of communicate their thoughts. Whereas now, of course, like you say, that's kind of been picked apart, and people have looked through all the code and probably worked out exactly how things work, and obviously talked to lots of us about it. But in terms of anything we put in now, it's interesting as well, because now if you release a game, certainly if it's something that it's sitting on your machine, people will also look at that, and within days will have gone through all the code and said, this is exactly where everything is. So it's in the past you might be tempted to kind of try and hide some of that, but it's almost like not much point trying to hide it now, because people will find out what's in the code anyway.
Yeah.
So I guess if there was anything like that, it would have to be hidden in a way that was more not something the answer would be in the code. So you couldn't say, oh, there's a secret object, and somebody goes, oh, I'll find where they store all the objects in the game. It's in this part of the game code and the data, and I'll look it up here. Instead, it would have to be something more like a riddle or something, I guess. And if people solve that, but then people would, people guess the answers to riddles. If there's enough people, they'll work it out anyway. So it would have to be something quite clever, or it would have to be maybe go to this web page on this particular day in the future, and then then something will be revealed. So I guess that's probably the best way you can have something that connects forwards anyway. Something connecting back, that's trickier because, like I say, people will find that and go. So if you have something in the game that's, say, a hidden key or something, somebody would already have found that key and said, oh, you can access that key. You just need to type in these lines or run this script, and then it'll patch this into your game. It's a lot harder to do that now.
You've said key like 8 times, so now I have to ask a nerdy question while we're on the topic. Okay, so the mystery eggs, that whole kind of thing with Banjo was sort of not only solved, but also sort of came to pass in the form of the 360 ports, in that carrying over the data, and then you get the unlockables that I'm assuming was what the intended purpose was. The thing with the ice key, and like supposedly there was like a fridge in like Donkey Kong's house that had like Banjo-Kazooie's face on it. Like, was there something with that? I don't know if that's ever been talked about before. Like, was there something with that you remember that didn't get integrated or something? I'm morbidly curious.
There possibly was. It may be that there was certainly definite plans and code and assets created for the Banjo hot stop and swap, but for future games, I think there was also a notion that we'd be able to chain things into future games, but I don't know that or what stage it got to in Donkey Kong 64. So it may be that there was the beginnings or the thinking around that, but I don't think it got that far, probably because when there was a point when it was clear that it was not going to be possible to do this on Nintendo 64 because we were doing things that weren't going to be supported by Nintendo. Right. Understandably, now when you see their point of view, is that obviously what we're effectively telling people to do was take the cartridge out, and then put a new cartridge in without turning. Well, I can't remember if we did it. I think we turned off the machine, turn it on immediately, and the idea was that the RAM on the machine still held values several seconds after you switched it off. If you switched it back on, you still access those values. So we were kind of relying on that, but there's no guarantee that as you're a hardware manufacturer and as you improve and change in your hardware from revision to revision, that timing will still always be there. And it starts to encourage people to quickly pull things out of the console and jam in another cartridge. So I guess that's probably not. In retrospect, that probably wasn't ever going to really fly, but I suppose that was it. At that time, we just kind of thought, "Hey, this is cool. Let's try that." Yeah.
It's just funny because now that I think about it, that's such a programmer, tech junkie, oh, that's cool, kind of thing, and and then I realized you step back and for a regular and especially like a kid who's like, "Mommy, why is my game system completely bricked now?" It's like, whoops, uh-oh. It's like writing angry letters to this one company. It's like, whoopsie. But I guess actually, while we're talking about some of this stuff, I might as well. I'm curious about some of this this nerdy old school stuff. And as with Grant, if you don't remember some of these things, because this was many years ago, totally fine. One thing I was incredibly happy to see, and this was I don't know who put this together, but the documentary that came out recently for Rare Replay that was about Dream, that was incredibly intriguing to me because for years and years and years and years I had been very curious about what the deal was with that game, and the beta Banjo-Kazooie stuff, and how the whole sort of evolutionary process of that was. I know there was a lot you guys talked about in that. Was there anything further about, I guess, I don't know, the story or the characters or anything? I don't know how far into expanding that stuff you had gotten before it shifted into Banjo. But was there any other kind of stuff maybe that hadn't been mentioned in that documentary that was kind of interesting that you can remember?
The thing that always sticks in my mind, but because I had to say the line so many times, is because we started off and the character was a boy called Edison. I'm trying to remember. You probably remember more than me. I did watch the video as well. But we started that, and I remember we had to do. So I think I did some voices for that character. And I think he said he was coming down. He saw that there's a dog in trouble, I think, and then he had to go and help the dog and rescue it. And so he said, "A dog! I can see a dog down there. I better go and see if he's all right." And then we changed it to a bear, which is then Banjo, and then we had to redo the lines, and it was a dog. I can see a dog down there.
Oh my god!
we had
You could still make it happen now.
That's the main thing I remember about that bit. And then when we were working on the section of the game where the character would be chased by the trolls, I think that was actually shown in the video, in the making of the video. I think there's a little clip of that, if I recall. Or maybe I just imagined that.
No, there was a little bit of that. There was the dinosaur, which I think probably became the basis for the Stomp on a Don or whatever for 2E, which was great. I mean, the graphics look really cool. I don't know, just something about like when Grant uploaded like all of that music that he did, a lot of which there were like bits and pieces that kind of turned into some of the Banjo themes as well. I just became like really curious about like, well, what was the story of this going to be? I remember, I think Greg was talking about there was like some subplot with like the pirates, like Black Eye was looking for like some magical material that would make like a flying pirate ship or something, and I'm just saying, if I were 10 and this came out, I would have loved this game probably.
Yeah, I guess it was one of those things where I think we'd been working on it for probably about a year or so, and it didn't look advancing, I think, at the speed we wanted, and some of the so we kind of changed it around, I suppose, partly maybe in response to seeing something like Super Mario 3D World and seeing how that had taken an approach. Because I think the approach that we took was because when you came to the N64, going from the Super Nintendo, when we built like Donkey Country, all the visuals were were pre-rendered images that were created on a high-end silicon graphics workstation. So they're each one still frames like normal frames, animation frames, but they were all pre-rendered, so that's why they look really good. But when you then went to N64, obviously that's first generation of a machine that can do 3D polygonal characters, but the quality of those characters compared to what we've been building was kind of almost in some ways a downgrade, because obviously you couldn't match the fidelity graphically of what we were producing in a frame on the Super Nintendo. You couldn't match that on the N64. So we tried to do that by building a game where all the background visuals were built up of tiles that kind of rotated, and plants that were kind of flat to camera. And so from then we could have more detailed characters for the main characters, because we could spend less time drawing these other characters. But in the end, it didn't really work, because as you move the camera around, you tended to get a lot of visual glitching. And so we were going down that route for about a year, and then I think that, as you've probably heard, what happened was we've taken a look at what the Conquer team were building and thought, actually, having less polygons may not be such a bad thing after all, because you can actually get a lot of character out of them if you kind of build them carefully. So we then kind of changed this around and said, oh, let's do it all polygonal.
And then beat Conquer to the punch.
Well, I think I think it kind of worked out that we were then, of course, there was then two games which were very similar in nature. I think Chris Seaver probably tells the better story better, but the question was, one of them had to proceed as was, but there was an alternative plan for Conquer, so that they could end being quite different games. So that's kind of how that happened.
Actually, it's funny. The story that Seaver and other people have heard is kind of like, I don't want to put you in the spot, but it's funny because like whenever they talk about like what happened with that, sometimes they're just like, yeah, and then I probably can't talk about that, and I'm like, what? Oh. I was like, okay, interesting. But I mean, I think things worked out in the long run, because I mean, Conquer being what it was pretty great. So I wouldn't trade it for 12 Tales necessarily. But on the note of Banjo too, actually, I gotta say this, and I'm so happy. This is probably the most like whatever thing to you guys when you were doing this part of the documentary, but a huge mystery you solved for me for like probably 10, 15 years was answering what the hell that like temple level was. The test level, because I would see pictures of that for so long, and people being like, oh, this was Mount Fire Eyes, and this was originally Gruntilda's lair when she was an ogre or whatever, and all this like probably completely made up nonsense. And I'm like, what is this level? And then finally just in that, oh, this was the test level where we were trying out the controls, and I'm just like, oh, Okay, cool. Thanks. Good. Anyway, but I also I've heard throughout many different interviews you guys have done and articles and things about like there were intended to be like so many more stages in Banjo that were kind of either cut or repurposed for Tui. How many if you remember how many were you like planning for like the like very first kind of like overall scope of what Kazooie was going to be?
I think I'll probably have to go to my stock Grant Kirkhope answer of I can't remember that far back, but I think I mean like you said there was certainly from going from Banjo-Kazooie to Banjo-Tooie there was definitely things that we didn't fit in or we thought actually let's leave this for the next game. I'm trying to think actually even if at which point we'd actually decided to do a sequel. I'm trying to even remember whether that was something that was premeditated or more a case of whether we literally waited and said, is it going to be successful? But I think we from what I recall, we pretty much moved straight on to doing the sequel. We didn't kind of mess around trying to do anything else. So I think probably because we had that momentum of we knew what we were building, we had other things to put in there. We kind of moved on to the sequel straight away. So yeah, there was I can't remember unfortunately exactly how many different things we took across, but there was I'm sure there was I think Hillfire Peaks rings a bell, and maybe there may be other levels where we took things across.
I know Mayhem Temple was one. I think because Grant mentioned the Come and Have
know more
Go.
than me. So actually, I should be interviewing you. I should be People get a far better answer.
I mean, I've been such a junkie for this stuff for so long. It's just I don't know.
You really are, dude. You're worse than me, and I've got the tattoo for God's sake.
That's true. That's true. He does have a Banjo-Kazooie tattoo. Actually, okay, this is something probably more pressing because this is more recently, but so I don't know like how. Likely at the time, I know there was like that Space World presentation thing or whatever, like before the Microsoft buyout happened, but I don't know how like, realistic a Banjo 3 was going to be at the time. But one of the things I was always curious, because like when I tell people about Yooka, I basically just say, it's Banjo 3. That's, to me, it's like, this is what it is it's another Banjo game with some new cool stuff. But I think about, if this was basically were a lot of the ideas in this like meant for what may or may not have been a Banjo 3, or did you guys really kind of like just start from scratch with it? Like, was there anything that kind of carried over from? Because I don't even know if there was like any kind of plan on the table, before, during, after Nintendo or whatever to make a full-on, nuts and bolts aside, like a third traditional Banjo game. Sorry.
I think what we built with Yooka was more just not starting from scratch, but it wasn't kind of like we'd kind of said, here's the ideas from 15 years ago that we couldn't get to work, or we'll get them to work now. It was more a case of looking back and going, those are the things that people liked. Let's see if we can bring those up to date, or just do we take those across, or do we change them? In some cases we changed things. I talked about the swimming controls earlier. In other cases we kept things as was, like the camera. Some of those times the people liked it, some of those times people not everybody liked everything that we took across. And I think probably if we did anything, we probably stayed more towards the side of taking things. If we were unsure, we probably said, well, let's take this as it is, rather than modify it if we were unsure in any way. Because what we didn't want to do is change too many things, because then kind of the whole point of the Kickstarter was to kind of bring back this feel of games from that era. So that was a very deliberate decision. So a lot of the decisions were made along those lines. So it was kind of looking back to what they were and kind of reviewing them ourselves and thinking, oh, this is how can these things be modernized? How can they be? How can we improve on what we did then? Mm-hmm. Just that kind of gives you a kind of an answer. So there wasn't really a kind of a case of taking any secret plans that we had before and then using them. It was kind of building stuff from scratch, as it were, based on our knowledge of the past.
I just imagine there's some alternate universe where like Banjo and Kazooie are at Capital Casino, or like, oh god, oh help me, what's the space level? God, Galleon Galaxy, which was really creative.
Yes.
I really
Chris,
liked
that
one.
took you way too long. That
I just played it a month ago. I know, for Christ's sake. Well, because that one was also kept pretty secret until like the game came out. So
that's true.
But that was a cool one.
That was interesting. Just on that point, is that we were trying to, although in the Kickstarter we need to update people on what's going on. It's also a case of trying to not give away too much, because people, when we started the Kickstarter, people said, "Don't tell me anything about it," and it was kind of difficult then, because obviously you've got some people who want to know everything and some people who want to know as little as possible because they want to be surprised. So we tried to not reveal certain things about, for example, the expansion on Glacier and certain, like, at least the last level, just because we thought people need some surprises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, well, Galleon Galaxy, I think, was also a cool surprise, because it was like, I don't even know if that's something that would have been like a level idea for Banjo back in the day, so that felt very like unique and cool to see that one. God, I can't remember who asked this one, but somebody wanted to know about, they were mentioned, I forget who had also said that, like, you guys were fond of pulling pranks on each other around the office. Were there any funny horror stories from the Playtonic office of people messing around with each other during development of this game?
Well, I think it's been told before, there is the story when we were back in N64 era, when we were all using Silicon graphics machines. Because before that we were all using PCs, and there wasn't even really a network, so you didn't get any email or anything. And then with the advent of the Silicon graphics machines that everybody had on their desk, you had a webcam, and then you had things that were, for today you think, well, yeah, webcam, whatever, but of course you've got that. But that back then was like, wow, this is like, we've gone into space age. We've actually got a webcam. And you had a webcam, and then you could also, because of the way they were connected, you could basically log into some. And this is obviously, again, nowadays would be like, this would be a breach of many rules and regulations, but you could actually log in to someone else's machine. And I remember you could run commands which would play noises on other people's machines. So you could basically play samples, audio samples, and they would play on that person's machine. So what Grant used to do was collect samples of people from around the office, and in some cases, I think he had, at the time, there was one of the cleaning ladies who would collect all the cups, and she would come and say, "Any cups in here?" And there was a clip of her that he used to play on people's machines. So he'd log in, and then it would just start playing on your machine at some spurious point during the day. And then there wasn't anything you could do. But that's the thing. You thought, but even if you knew what to do, it would probably take you too long to be able to type that in to actually stop them doing it. So you just had to kind of take it.
That's so childish, but I love it to bits. I would do exactly the same. I know.
The other thing, I was saying to somebody the other day, the other thing you could do, I don't even know if you realize this, but I'd found out, is you could log into someone else's machine, and you could run a command called screen grab, and it would take a copy of the screen, whatever is on the screen, and save it to file. And so you could run a little script that basically said screen grab and then display screen. And then so you could actually very slowly, admittedly, you could watch what they were doing on their screen without them even knowing. It was like, that's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Intrusive.
So,
the audio samples, sorry, you just reminded me of another thing. What the hell? I don't even know if you can answer this. What the hell is Stephen Mails Boys and
I was
Pails?
going to bring this up.
What is that?
Only Grant probably knows.
Oh God, he never answers.
I've asked him, and he said that he won't.
Oh God, that's a mystery that he'll die by. I have a feeling.
He'll probably he'll go to the very end, I'm sure.
Almighty. Sorry,
it'll be written on his gravestone. The answer will be written on his gravestone.
It was me making fun of him. There you go. Sorry, I interrupted you before about the story.
No, that's good. Always good to have your impression of Grant in. I think that's good. Just basically talk as fast as possible.
Are you daft? You know how he was in line trying to play Mario Rabbids Kingdom which he did the music for, which was incredible. Massive shout out.
Yeah, it's
Congrats
great, isn't
to
it?
him. And he was in line, and I'm like, dude, just be like, are you daft? Do you know who I am? Put me to the front of the line, for Christ's sake. You haven't got a chance. All right, I got a couple left, and then I think we'll start to wrap things. Shady, do you have any other ones you want to get out?
I have two.
Okay. Oh well, I have two. So lightning round. Let's go.
Okay. Do you want me to go?
Yes, you go first. I believe.
Okay, mine's a really quick one. Okay, I've noticed that on the door of Batship Crazy, great name by the way, you've got the engraving G50. Now, I'm going to make a wild guess. Was that like the assigned room you were given with the first cubicle when you were developing Playtonic, or am I off base?
No, that. Actually, it's not the first room, but it's the room where a lot of the development was done. So we started off in one building, which was actually which was a completely different set of offices, which happened to also be G because it was the ground floor. That was G4, I think. And then we moved from Derby to Burton, and then we were in G5 to 6, and then we were then in G50 for a large part of the time, and then more recently, just the start of this year, we moved to somewhere which doesn't have a G on it. So it was actually probably because of the G50. So that would have been room G50, I think. I think that's. I'm just trying to think. Was it G50? Now I'm starting to doubt my own memory, but I'm thinking it was G50. Yeah, it was definitely around this. Yeah, so that
was there anything of significance that happened that made you decide, with you being in all these different rooms through the progress of development, that G50 was the most important one to put on the door? Was there anything like mind-blowingly, I don't know, an epiphany during that room or something?
No, I don't know the specific reason on that one. I mean, that would probably been done by Dave Rose. So he often will add lots of kind of Easter eggs and things into his background. So that's probably a question for him, really, because he might, I imagine that'll be who added that in.
There may be Easter eggs in the game that you're not even aware
of. Quite possibly, yeah, quite possibly.
No control
That's great.
Of these people.
Who are these people, anyway?
God, who are all these people that are working for me?
Who are all these people? I come into our office every day. Who are you? Who are you? At least give me your name.
We're making your video game. Oh, is that right? I mean, this one was asked by like everyone in existence. Whatever you can say that is okay without giving too much away. Plans or any thoughts or anything whatsoever for a sequel to Yooka, or do you want to focus more on maybe doing a different genre next? What is next for Playtonic in general? I'd say after you guys get the Switch port and all that settled.
Yeah, so I guess we've got our current update that's coming out. So hopefully not too far off, and then after that we'll be looking to finish off Switch, and then we obviously got some DLC to come out. So after that, well, who knows? I kind of always change this question around and say, well, what would people like to see?
Diddy Kartos Racing, man. That's what I'm saying.
Pagie game, give it to me.
I've got the name here. You wrote Kartos Off the Rails. That was
Kartos Off the Rails. You don't have to charge for that. I'll give that one. Sorry.
Puzzle Piece was the other one. That was
Puzzle Piece. God almighty.
Pagie's Puzzle.
Pagie's Puzzle, and probably needs another P in it. Pagie's Puzzle.
Piss off.
Pieces.
Pagie's Piss Up.
A drinking game then.
Excellent.
Well,
he'd
get all soggy. That wouldn't be good for him.
Pagie's Piss Up.
Shady, what was your second one?
Yes, my second one actually goes to when you got me in to do the recording for, as aforementioned, the lovely Pagie. When you asked me to record for him, you also asked me to, as well as the emotes, provide you with some, as you quoted, just in case, like pain noises, sad sighs, and some other general sort of fodder. What was that intended for? Because it didn't get used.
So that was the reason we asked people to do that is when we did a lot of the recordings, we hadn't actually finalized exactly how those characters would be used. So we would get people in, we'd have a Skype call with them and give them a quick tour of the studio over Skype, and then we kind of ask for certain noises, which were usually vowel sounds, I think, if you recall, and then there was some other things like hit noises and things, because we didn't know, like, if we were doing the recording sometimes like months and months in advance of us actually implementing the character in game, we didn't know if when we put them in, we might have an idea and think, oh, actually that character should be hit, or maybe this should happen to them. I mean, in a lot of the cases, that wasn't the intention. If we knew that in advance, we would have asked people to do that. But it was kind of like a safety net, because what we didn't want to happen is then have to go back to people and go, hey, you know that, can we do another recording? And then them go, oh, my recording equipment's blown up, or the cat ate my recording system, and they'd have to do it again, and then, or they might not be available, or so it was kind of a safety net, really. So that's why. I was trying to think, actually, didn't we use any of the? Because I suppose some of the pages, there's some of the pages that talk to you when you're there in the cages and then try and get out. But I don't think we necessarily used.
No, there was a moment where it was like, I know origami kung fu, and I was expecting he's gonna start kicking off, and my noise is gonna be there, but there was nothing.
And I was like, no, my noises. Yeah.
Bruce Lee, Pagie. That's what the game. Pagie's personal fighter. That's what it needs to be. Fighting game. You
gotta have some like Minjo equivalent characters or something for like bad Pages that'll actually just try to like paper cut you or something. But also, by the way, not a question, but maybe a suggestion. Because I feel like with how like bigger of a deal voice acting in games has become, you guys should release like a cast list, because a lot of people like don't know like who played who in the game. So even with like
sometimes I don't even know who they played. If you had to have had the name.
Again, this has happened again.
Oh my god.
This because what would happen is Dan would have brought people in and said, "Oh, try this voice, try that voice," and so we got there was a T-shirt that we had actually one of the shows, and we would sign whenever we want them signed, we'd sign our names under the character that we each of the characters that we voiced. So some of them I know, but some of them remain a mystery. But actually, that's a good point. Maybe we should have a cast list so people know
absolutely. IMDb can have proper updates and figure out who's who, and that would be helpful. And then, my very last question. This is absolutely a self-indulgent one, so I do apologize to everybody. But so we're aiming to do a Kickstarter for we're making a turn-based RPG, and we're going to be doing a crowdfunding campaign hopefully over the summer. And one of our big intentions is that we want to have most of our donation incentives be for the donators getting to be in the game as like background characters, because there's going to have to be like a lot of like people around and populate all these areas and stuff. And it's I'm taking a lot of nods from like Paper Mario and a lot of the Mario RPG games and things. In general, I know this could probably be a whole other separate podcast in and of itself, but offhanded, from having now had what I hope was a pretty good experience with Kickstarter, any advice or suggestions or pitfalls to be aware of, or anything that you would suggest to my team?
That's like an hour-long answer.
I know. Yeah.
But actually, no. I suppose in summary, the thing to be aware of is if you're going to have physical rewards, the thing of the physical rewards is they're great for the people who are getting the physical rewards. They're great for the people who are thinking up the physical rewards in the first instance, but those same people who have thought up those physical rewards, when it comes to then getting those rewards manufactured or produced and then shipped and then stored, then those people, they seem less like a good idea a few months before you're about to ship those rewards.
No, we're not doing any physical. We're keeping it all digital, because I'm just like, I don't want to deal with that headache.
Also, it's going to kill your wrist with all the signing you're going to have to do.
Well, yeah,
that's right. Too. Yeah, so that's the thing. One thing I'd be wary of is just because. Now, I suppose the other thing is, again, they're great. Physical things are great for people, but the actual, because you've got to make something and get it made, there's costs involved in there. So the actual perceived cost, the amount that somebody's giving you is a perceived amount of X, but when it's a
Yeah.
physical thing, is actually a large part of that is actually often to actually make it, and so in fact, you're actually getting less for that than you would be for a digital item.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of there. Let's see, any other things? I guess that's probably one of the bigger ones. I guess just having having enough time to kind of try and have someone available to answer people's questions. I mean, we've spent, I think there's like 1,000 or so emails within the first few days that we had, because it depends on the scale. We weren't expecting that. So if you've got people ready to answer questions, because though you'll think you've thought of everything in your FAQ, and then somebody or loads of people come up with things that you just didn't even consider. So I suppose a lot of what it is looking at other Kickstarters and kind of going, how have they handled that? What questions did they have? How did they do this? What sort of should we do something similar? Should we do something? How could we do that better or different? Or how could we stand out? That kind of thing. So, yeah, and I suppose obviously it helps if you can get yourself announced somewhere on like a stage E3, like Shenmue or something. So
yeah. we want to try to aim for GDC next year if possible. If hopefully we have enough to show by that point. But yeah, no. Well, I mean, like I said to Grant, and when we did the interview with him a long time ago, and I'm very happy it came to pass that, like, you guys made everything you asked for in spades, and like, we're super happy that, like, not even just like for Yooka-Laylee itself, like which is fantastic, and I love the game, but also we're just glad that, like, now that we have appreciation for the people that, like, made this stuff that we grew up with, we're really happy that you guys did get to, have this big, like, Muppets Get Backing adventure, like, reunion, and hugging and kissing each other and making games like the old days again is really good. And I hope that Playtonic is grows to be something really awesome for all of you guys and all of your team. And thanks, just thank not just you, Chris, but everybody for just all the stuff that you guys have done for all these years and in recent years, because it has helped shaped us into the weirdos that we are today. So
well, thank you very much for not just having me here, but also for your backing on the Kickstarter. I like to, if I meet people, I usually and they say I'm a backer, I like to shake the hand. Unfortunately, I have to virtually shake it today. But
I'll pretend.
I had the pleasure of shaking yours though back in September.
That's right, exactly. Yeah,
I did.
So, yeah, thanks very much for your support. We didn't expect, we didn't expect it was going to be as big as it was, and it's great that it was, because it allowed us to build the game that we built. And yeah, here's to the future.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, Chris, thanks again for joining us. Everybody in the comments below, if you have any fond memories of any of the many games that Chris has worked on from back in the day, or even Yooka-Laylee as of recent, leave your feedback below. If you have any suggestions for future Kirblog topics between me and Shady or anybody, leave comments about that too, etc. Chris, where can people follow? I mean, I'm sure the Playtonic website and all that stuff, but do you have Twitter or anything that people can follow?
Yes, I'm on Chris_Suth on Twitter, but also obviously Playtonic Games on Twitter is the main source for all your Playtonic Games news, because that's where it happens. You'll get all the latest updates there on all the things that we're doing and whatever we're doing next.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'll have a link to your social medias and all that stuff. Everybody, please go pick up Yooka-Laylee. I will be certainly getting a copy for Switch after I get a Switch, because I'd love to play it on a Nintendo console again and feel like I'm 12. That'll do it. So, Shady, thank you for being my assistant and lovely golden shining collectible, as always.
Ooh.
And we will catch you all again on the flip side in some other place and time. I'm bad at ending these.